Yo, hold up. Joe McCann just got caught, and what they found buried in this man's past is way bigger than one secret marriage. We talking hidden lives, a collapsed crypto empire, and an 11-hour silence that has Tanzania refusing to give this man his passport back. And the audacity? Bro really thought he could fly into Africa, lose Ashlee Jenae in a locked villa, and walk back into America like nothing happened. Joe picked the worst possible country to try this in. Tap subscribe before Joe's lawyers tap this video down. You're gonna want a front row seat to this collapse. Ashlee Robinson, known to over 130,000 followers as Ashlee Jenae, was found unresponsive inside Villa 25 of the Zanzibar resort, a belt around her neck, after a 4-day argument with her fiancé. The incident happened the night of April 8, 2026, on Nungwi Beach, Tanzania, and she was pronounced dead the next day. Joe McCann really thought she did it to herself was gonna fly. Now, let's look at the receipts that show why this story doesn't add up. But before we go any deeper, I need you to picture the setting Joe chose. Zanzibar is not some random beach motel. This is a $950 a night, ocean view, locked gate luxury resort where staff are literally trained to vanish into the background and never, ever interrupt a guest. That's the kind of place rich people go specifically because nobody's watching. So when I tell you the staff at this resort had to physically intervene in Joe and Ashlee's relationship, not once but twice, you need to understand how rare that is. Hotels like this don't move guests for noise. They move guests when somebody on the inside thinks somebody might not make it through the night. And here's the part that's been eating at me since the news dropped. Ashlee didn't go to Tanzania alone, scared or unsure. She went with stars in her eyes. She went with a fiancé who had just proposed to her on a wildlife safari weeks earlier, surrounded by giraffes, savanna sunsets, and rose petals. She went thinking this was the soft life vacation that would close out her birthday month perfectly. 4 days later, she was being carried out of a villa in a body bag. Tell me how a trip starts at chapter 31, exactly where I'm supposed to be, and ends in a closet with a belt around her neck. There's no version of that math that makes sense without somebody lying. And this is where the receipts come in. Because once you stack them up side by side, Joe's story doesn't just have holes in it. It has craters. We starting with the words. Just the words. Because when you stack what people actually said next to each other, the story Joe gave the cops starts cracking before we even get to the analysis. Receipt number 1. Ashlee's last public words. On April 5th, 2026, on her birthday in Tanzania, Ashlee posted that now famous Instagram caption, Chapter 31, and I'm exactly where I need to be. That was the giraffe video. Rose petals. The whole soft life dream. When I read that line back now, I had to do a double take. 3 days later this woman is gone? Nah, that don't sit right with anybody breathing. And here's the part that haunts me. She meant every single word. That post wasn't performative. The comments under it from her closest friends were celebrating her like she had finally arrived at peace. 3 days. From exactly where I need to be to a body in a closet. 3 days. Receipt number 2. The mother's call. Yolanda Denise Endres told ABC7 that Ashlee called her on April 8th and told her, in her own words, that she and McCann had been moved into separate rooms after an argument. Ashlee said it. Out her own mouth. To her mama. That's a woman documenting trouble in real time, y'all. That's not a woman in a suicidal crisis. That's a woman calling home. Think about who calls their mother mid-fight on a vacation. That's a daughter who feels something shifting. That's a daughter laying down a paper trail without even realizing she's doing it. Mothers don't forget calls like that. Yolanda has replayed every word 1,000 times since April 8th. Receipt number 3. The 11-hour bomb. Yolanda told ABC News, and I'ma quote her exact words, "He told me it had been 11 hours prior." She also said McCann told her Ashlee did something to herself and she was being taken to the hospital, and he told me she was stable. Bro said what? Stable? After 11 hours of silence? When I heard that I had to mute my TV. That's the dumbest, coldest flex I've ever heard from a so-called fiancé. 11 hours, y'all. That's a workday. That's a flight from New York to Dubai. That's enough time to draft a statement, call a lawyer, scrub a hard drive, and rehearse a story in the mirror. There is no innocent reason a man waits 11 hours to tell his fiancée's mother that her daughter is unconscious. Receipt number 4. The father's plea. Harry Robinson told CBS News, "The fiancé did not reach out to us at all. We found out from the hotel, and then he said the line that broke the internet. That's devastating when your daughter's halfway around the world. We just wanted to know where she was at, who she was with, and that she was okay. Just give us something." Y'all hear that? That's a father begging for crumbs from a man who supposedly was about to be his son-in-law. Read that quote one more time. Just give us something. That's a grown man, a father, on national television, lowering himself to beg a 41-year-old crypto millionaire for the most basic human courtesy. And Joe couldn't muster a phone call. Couldn't muster a text. Couldn't muster one word. That's not grief. That's strategy. Receipt number 5. Joe's own words to police. According to the medical record obtained by WPVI-TV, Joe told hospital staff, and this is verbatim from the doc, according to the husband, he found she hanged herself on the door. Hold up. Husband? They wasn't even married. We just found out about a secret marriage to somebody else. Bro casually called himself her husband on a hospital intake form. Nah, you can't say that and expect people to take you seriously. And the kicker? In Tanzania, the word husband on a medical record gives you legal access to the body, the autopsy decisions, and the release timeline. Joe wasn't confused. Joe was calculating. He picked a word that gave him control over a corpse before the family could even get to the airport. Receipt number 6, the police statement. Zanzibar's North Unguja Regional Police Commander officially called what happened a misunderstanding between the couple and said McCann was being questioned as a witness while his travel document had been withheld. A misunderstanding. For a fight so loud the next-door villa filed a complaint. That word right there? That's where the cops lost the plot trying to spin it gentle. Because here's what nobody's saying about Tanzanian police language. When they call something a misunderstanding, that's diplomatic speak for, we're not telling you the worst part yet. They're holding cards. They're saving evidence. They're not going to show their hand on day 3 of an investigation that's about to get a whole lot bigger. Receipt number 7, the Crypto King Philosophy. On a 2024 podcast, McCann told the world his whole investing strategy was seeking asymmetry, asymmetric upside, limited to no downside, should be coupled with avoiding the risk of ruin. When I saw this clip after everything went down, goosebumps. Bro literally built his name on managing downside risk and somehow couldn't manage one hotel night without a woman ending up dead. And let me tell you something about men who build their entire identity around no downside. They don't process loss like normal people. They eliminate it. They restructure it. They make it disappear from the books. A man whose career philosophy is avoiding ruin is a man who, when ruin shows up, will do anything to make ruin go away. Now that we got the quotes on the table, let's connect the dots. That last podcast quote? Recorded the same year his fund nearly doubled to $395 million. By July 2025, that same fund was reportedly down nearly 80%. See what I'm saying? The man whose entire brand was no downside was personally living through the biggest downside of his career 9 months before that Zanzibar trip. Joe really thought nobody would connect that timeline? An 80% drawdown isn't a bad quarter. That's career ending. That's investor lawsuit territory. That's explain yourself to the SEC territory. And he was supposed to walk into a Tanzanian beach proposal smiling like everything was fine? The math on his stress level alone tells you this man was a powder keg before that flight even took off. That mother's call? It happened the same night hotel management formally separated the couple and walked McCann to a different villa about a 10-minute walk away. Read that again. Hotel staff, luxury staff, trained not to interfere, actually intervened. That don't happen for a misunderstanding. That happens when somebody is scared somebody's gonna get hurt. And here's the detail that's gonna come back to bite Joe in court. A 10-minute walk means there's surveillance. Every luxury resort in East Africa is wired top to bottom for liability reasons. Tanzanian police already have that footage. They have Joe's face on a path, at a timestamp, walking somewhere he says he wasn't. Joe doesn't even know what they're sitting on yet. That 11-hour silence? Lined up with a behavior pattern Joe had been running for 16 straight months. Sources who spoke to Fortune confirmed that across his entire public relationship with Ashlee, McCann's social media, a guy who posted on X multiple times a day about crypto, never once acknowledged her existence. 16 months. Daily posts. 0 mentions. That's not private. That's strategic. And let's be real, men who post their whole life online don't suddenly become private when they meet somebody worth being public about. They become private when they have something to hide. That's a 16-month pattern of intentional erasure, and the algorithm doesn't lie. His statement came from a man who Fortune reports was previously married in 2018 to Shay Jackson, a brand marketing professional, 10 years his junior, with stints at Google and Facebook and currently at Nike Schemes. Their wedding was at the greenhouse at Driftwood in Texas. They divorced in 2021. But here's the wrinkle nobody's noticing. 2 founders who took venture money from McCann's fund told Fortune that some of his stake in Asymmetric was transferred to Jackson during the split. So a chunk of Asymmetric Financial isn't even fully his. Any smart person would have kept that quiet around a new fiancé. But Joe ain't smart. And honestly, if Ashlee had known a slice of his $45 million empire was legally tied up with another woman, that whole proposal video would have never happened. That's the kind of detail you bury under 3 NDAs and pray she never Googles. He gambled she wouldn't, and Ashlee paid for that gamble. That hospital record lines up with the police report. The couple checked into the Zuri on April 4th, quarreled frequently for 4 straight days, and on April 8th were separated for safety reasons. A few hours later, a hotel worker found Ashlee unresponsive in a closet with a belt around her neck. That's when you know Joe doesn't have real advisors. He gave a story about her hanging from a door, but the worker who actually found her? Closet. Different scene. Different setup. That contradiction alone is what forensic prosecutors live for. Door versus closet isn't a memory glitch. That's a man who didn't see the actual scene because he wasn't even in the room when somebody else discovered her. Or worse, he was, and he's lying about how it looked because the real scene tells a different story. That whole hubby act falls apart when you realize his ex-account references my wife and 2 very young children in posts dated 2024, years after his 2021 divorce from Shay. So either he was lying online for clout, or there's a whole second family Ashlee may have never known about. Either way, bruh, that's a red flag the size of Mount Kilimanjaro. And let's talk about which option is worse. Because if the wife and kids are real, that means Ashlee was the side piece in a relationship she thought was a marriage proposal. If the wife and kids were fake, that means Joe is the kind of man who manufactures imaginary families online for credibility points. Pick your poison. Both versions of Joe are men no woman should be alone in a foreign villa with. The Fortune piece even confirms McCann has a daughter, referenced in his own X posts. Ashlee's friends say she may have never been told. That's the move of somebody who's been living parallel lives for years. And once you start seeing the parallel life pattern, you can't unsee it. Different inboxes. Different burner accounts. Different stories told to different friend groups. Men who run multiple lives at once are operating with a stress load that always breaks. The only question is who's standing next to him when it breaks. In April 2026, that person was Ashlee Jenae. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Now check this out. Nobody's talking about the word choice in his statements. Zoom in on one phrase. Husband. When the medical record quotes Joe identifying himself, he doesn't say fiancé. He says husband. That ain't a slip-up from a guy whose whole career is precise messaging. In a country where being a spouse grants you next-of-kin medical access and maybe even claim over a body, calling yourself husband is a calculated move. And Joe really didn't think anybody would catch that? That's embarrassing detective work on his end. The man literally pitches investors for a living. He doesn't pick wrong words. He picks strategic words. So when his wrong word just so happens to grant him legal authority over a dying woman's body in a foreign country, that's not a slip. That's a play. Now zoom into the word stable. When he finally called Yolanda, he didn't say she's hurt. He didn't say, I don't know what's happening. He said she was stable. Stable is a clinical word, a specific word. The word a person uses when they're trying to buy time, not relay urgency. Real talk. If my fiancé was unconscious in an African hospital, the word stable wouldn't be in my vocabulary. I'd be screaming. The fact that he chose that controlled, almost corporate word tells you somebody was managing optics, not panicking. And linguists who study deception language will tell you, when people lie under stress, they reach for sterilized vocabulary. Stable is the verbal equivalent of a press release. That's not a fiancé in shock. That's a CEO doing damage control on a phone call he rehearsed. Now check the platform where his digital silence lived. Joe's Instagram? Private. His Facebook? Empty of Ashlee. His ex? Pure crypto charts and analysis posts, sometimes multiple times a day. That ain't an accident. That's segmentation. He kept her on her feed, where she's the brand, and kept his feeds clean of her so a different audience never had to know about a black 30-year-old fiancé. And let's call it what it is, digital segmentation. Like that is how men with multiple women keep their lives from colliding. There's literally academic research on this exact pattern. Joe wasn't being private, he was running an information firewall. And that firewall held until April 8th. If Joe had half a brain, he would have at least posted one picture in 16 months to sell the story. He couldn't even fake it. That tells you something even darker. He didn't fake it because he couldn't afford to. There were eyes on his feed that couldn't see Ashlee. Eyes that maybe wore a wedding ring. Eyes that maybe lived in his actual house. A man only runs that level of operational secrecy when the cost of being caught is catastrophic. And Ashlee was about to become the most public black woman in his life on a wedding day he was never going to show up to. Now look at the location choice for the proposal. Serval Wildlife. A remote luxury safari ground in Tanzania. Why propose in a country he had no business connection to, no family in, where he'd be 8,000 miles from any U.S. legal infrastructure if something went sideways? A man in a documented financial spiral picking the venue? That's the kind of detail forensic analysts circle in red ink. Because here's what the FBI knows that Instagram doesn't. When an American is harmed overseas, the U.S. legal system has almost zero jurisdiction unless the host country invites them in. Joe picked a country where, if everything went his way, the case might never even reach an American courtroom. The proposal location wasn't romance. It was a jurisdiction choice. And the gesture pattern in those proposal photos? Rewatch them. Ashlee is beaming. Joe is barely smiling in most frames, stiff body language, hand placement that almost looks performative. Fortune Bro looked like he was at a business meeting, not the happiest day of his life. That's the problem with Joe. He doesn't read between his own lines. Body language analysts have already started breaking down those photos frame by frame. The micro-expressions don't lie. He's smiling with his mouth. His eyes are calculating. His shoulders are angled away from her in 3 of the 4 hero shots. That's not a man in love. That's a man on a clock. One more piece. The hotel separation happened twice according to CoinDesk's reporting. The couple was split up twice by staff before the final night. Read that. Hotel staff don't drag a paying $950 a night guest out of a villa twice for a misunderstanding. That's a documented pattern of escalation, and Joe didn't even catch how badly that fact alone destroys his entire narrative. And here's what I keep going back to. Tanzanian hotel staff have testimony rights in court. Every employee who walked Joe to that second villa is a future witness. Every supervisor who signed off on that move filed documentation. Every villa swap gets logged in the property management software. Joe didn't just escalate twice. He created a paper trail of escalation in writing on a server in a country he doesn't control. Now, let's see how the media covered this. So peep the framing battle going on in the media right now because everybody's covering the story, but they ain't covering it the same. Fortune framed it as a crypto fund manager falls from grace story. Heavy emphasis on the 80% loss, the failed Solana treasury pivot, the disgruntled investors. To them, Joe is a finance villain who happens to have a dead fiancé. That framing is convenient because it lets people blame stress and money problems instead of the human in front of them. It's the financial version of boys will be boys, a way of softening accountability by burying the violence under spreadsheets. And don't get it twisted, that framing choice is what Wall Street media does to protect their own. Fortune doesn't want to be the magazine that called a sitting fund manager a killer before a verdict. So they hedge. They soften. They lead with the portfolio. CoinDesk took it even softer. They framed it as a probe, with Joe being questioned and asked to remain in the country. Their headlines still leaned on the police's preliminary suicide finding, even while noting the family disputes it. That's the crypto press protecting one of their own. Some Joe fans are saying the family is reaching, but those are the same people who thought a fund losing 80% in a year was just market volatility. And let me tell you something about CoinDesk. They're not a neutral news source on this. Their advertisers, their sponsors, their conference sponsors are all the same VCs whose names show up in Asymmetric's cap table. They can't frame Joe as a villain. Their entire revenue model says otherwise. CBS News and People magazine? Completely different framing. They centered Yolanda and Harry. They quoted that 11-hour delay verbatim. They led with mysterious circumstances, not preliminary suicide ruling. That framing tells you everything. The journalists who actually talked to the family don't believe the official line either. Mainstream news has no financial incentive to protect a crypto bro. So they're free to report what the family is actually saying. And what the family is actually saying is that their daughter was murdered. TMZ went the hardest, mapping out the day-by-day timeline and putting that medical record, the one that says unidentified mark, on her neck and quotes Joe calling himself husband, directly in front of readers' faces. That's the most damning framing because it lets the documents speak for themselves, no editorial spin needed. And TMZ doesn't have advertisers to protect. They built their brand on receipts, not relationships. So when TMZ comes out swinging with a medical record screenshot, you know the document is real because their lawyers cleared it before publishing. Now, some people defending Joe are saying, he's just a witness, his passport is just procedure, calm down. Here's why that doesn't hold up. BBC reporting confirmed police are speaking to him as a witness with no arrests, but they also confirmed his travel document is being held until the autopsy is complete. You don't hold a passport on a witness who's cooperating fully unless you're worried the witness is about to become something else. The media trying to spin neutrality, but the receipts Tanzania is sitting on don't lie. And here's the international law detail nobody's mentioning. Tanzania holding a U.S. passport indefinitely is a soft form of detention recognized in multiple human rights treaties. The U.S. Embassy already knows about this. Joe's lawyers already know about this. They're staying quiet because they know any public protest just confirms the seriousness of what's coming. If you still think Joe has a leg to stand on after all this evidence, you're just biased toward men in nice suits with VC backing. But here's what nobody is saying. The mainstream narrative is treating this like a tragedy with two equal sides. The family's grief on one hand, the official suicide ruling on the other, with everybody waiting politely for the autopsy. Wait your turn, be patient, let the system work.
Cool.
That's how American media is going to cover it. Here's what they won't tell you. This isn't a suicide investigation. This is the first time in modern memory that a Silicon Valley-backed white American man, a guy whose investors include Andreessen Horowitz and whose net worth is reportedly around $45 million, is about to find out that his money, his connections, and his Twitter clout are completely useless in a country he doesn't run. And let me say the part out loud that the polite people won't. This is the moment a system that was built to protect men like Joe loses its grip on him for the first time. For decades, men with his profile have moved through the world treating other countries like vacation backdrops with no consequences. Tanzania just ended that era for him personally. I'm picking the industry politics angle, and y'all need to hear me out. Because the reason American media is being so cautious, the reason CoinDesk is using soft words like probed, the reason Fortune is leading with his career instead of his behavior, is because the crypto industry needs this to look like a personal tragedy, not a systemic exposure. Joe McCann is not just a guy. He's a node. He's plugged into Mark Andreessen, Chris Dixon, Circle, the entire venture capital crypto pipeline. If he becomes a face of rich crypto bros killing women in Africa, That's a brand crisis that splashes way past one man. Joe is a puppet, and the industry is already pulling strings to soften how he's described in print. And don't think the industry hasn't run this play before. There's an actual playbook crypto PR firms hand to founders the second a story like this drops. Stay quiet, hire reputational lawyers, push positive coverage of the firm's other portfolio companies, wait for the news cycle to move. Joe is following that playbook to the comma. But here's the part the puppet masters didn't account for. Tanzania is not America. Tanzania is not going to play the innocent until proven guilty in an op-ed game. Tanzania already seized his passport. That's not a polite request. That's a sovereign government putting a foot on a rich foreigner's chest. And every day Joe sits there, he's burning through the one currency that matters in this case: time. The longer his crypto bro friends hype due process online, the more obvious it becomes that they have zero leverage over an African criminal investigation. Tanzanian criminal procedure was literally built to resist foreign pressure. Their justice system has spent the last 30 years saying no to foreign embassies that thought money buys exits. Joe walked into the one country in the world where his name doesn't move the needle. Y'all want to know why the Fortune article had to admit Asymmetric's website took down its team page after this? Because his own people are scrubbing him. The industry needs Joe to fail quietly. They're already cutting him loose, and he's giving them exactly the disaster they were terrified of. Wayback Machine has the receipts. The team page existed on April 7th, was scrubbed by April 11th. 3 days. That's how fast the people who hyped Joe up for years pretended they never knew him. Crypto loyalty has a 72-hour expiration date when there's a body involved. Now apply the historical pattern. We've seen this before. Rich foreign men have been disappearing or self-harming young women in resort countries for decades, and the playbook is always the same. Heated argument, separated rooms, locked door, suicide ruling, family ignored, body delayed, autopsy complete but not shared. Sound familiar? That's the exact pattern playing out here, except this time the world is watching in real time on Instagram with a 130,000 follower paper trail. And that paper trail is what changes everything. Past cases died because there were no witnesses, no posts, no comments, no public timeline. Ashlee Jenae left a trail so thick that prosecutors don't have to reconstruct her last days. They can just scroll. Her own platform is testifying for her from the grave. Joe is repeating a script, and he doesn't even realize he's the only one who hasn't read the new ending. He thinks he's running a 1995 playbook in a 2026 case. He thinks the family will get tired. He thinks the algorithm will move on. He thinks his lawyers will eventually find a hole in the autopsy. He's wrong on every single point. The new media cycle doesn't forget. Every TikTok creator covering this case is one viral video away from putting Joe's face back on the front page for the next 18 months straight. And the cultural impact piece? Ashlee Jenae wasn't just an influencer. She was the face of the soft life movement for Black women, the gospel that said you don't have to settle, you don't have to suffer, you deserve ease. That movement has tens of millions of followers across TikTok, IG, YouTube. When she died in a locked villa next to a man with hidden families and a collapsed fund, it didn't just kill a person. It shattered a contract, the contract that promised Black women that visibility plus self-worth equals safety. Joe represents the old lie that the culture is done with. The lie that says a man's brand, charismatic CEO, philosopher DJ, crypto thought leader, should override what your gut is telling you when you're alone in a room with him. Black women on social media right now are sharing stories of men they almost stayed with, men whose resumes they almost let override their instincts. Ashlee's death is becoming a generational reset on what qualified means in a partner. This is Joe's desperate attempt to stay relevant in a culture that's already moving past him. Every move he makes is predictable. He's playing checkers, lawyer up, stay quiet, wait it out, while Tanzania, the family, and 100,000 Ashlee Jenae loyalists are playing four-dimensional chess with the receipts she left behind. The Cardi B comment alone reached 40 million people in 24 hours. That's the kind of celebrity gravity Joe's PR team can't outrun, because Cardi doesn't have shareholders to answer to. She just speaks. And when she speaks, the algorithm listens. And here's the real psychological warfare angle nobody dares say out loud. Joe's whole identity is asymmetric upside, no downside. That's how he markets himself. That's his thesis. But the way he allegedly handled this trip, the documented arguments, the husband claim, the 11-hour delay, the 16-month digital erasure of his own fiancée, shows a man who is psychologically incapable of accepting downside. So when his fund collapsed, when his hidden family started leaking, when the curated image was about to crack open in front of a woman with 130,000 followers, what does a man like that do? He doesn't have to plan anything sinister to be guilty. He just has to be a man whose entire personality cannot survive being exposed. That's the truth they won't tell you. Joe McCann isn't a villain in a thriller. He's a brand in a downward spiral, and Ashlee Jenae was the last asset on his books. Forensic psychologists call this an exposure spiral, the moment a curated identity faces real public puncture. Most men in that spiral go bankrupt, get divorced, disappear to a smaller city, start over. Some men in that spiral do something a lot worse. The data is clear on which type Joe is. And that's the truth they won't say on Fortune.com. So what happens next? Let me lay out 3 roads this thing is heading down, and I'm telling you right now, Joe loses on every single one. Scenario 1. Here's what's most likely to happen. The independent U.S. autopsy the family is funding through that GoFundMe, the one that's already raised over $50,000, comes back and contradicts the suicide ruling. When that report drops, the cerebral hypoxia finding from the second hospital is going to get cross-referenced with the closet scene the worker described, and Tanzania is going to have everything they need to upgrade Joe from witness to person of interest overnight. And here's what's going to make the report hit. American forensic pathologists are going to look at ligature angle, hyoid bone integrity, and petechial hemorrhaging in a way Tanzanian first-pass examiners may not have. When that second autopsy hits, the technical contradictions are going to stack so high that even Joe's defenders won't be able to read past page 2 without going quiet. Mark my words, when that happens, Joe is going to look desperate, suddenly tweeting, suddenly issuing a statement through his attorney, suddenly remembering Ashlee exists on his Instagram for the first time in 16 months. It's going to be the most transparent PR pivot of the year, and nobody's going to buy it. Watch for the carefully staged church visit. Watch for the leaked private grief photo. Watch for the surprise interview with a crypto-friendly journalist where he tears up on camera. That whole playbook is already drafted in some PR firm's Google Doc, just waiting for the autopsy to drop. The silence is going to hurt him more than any diss track could, because he's already spent 2 weeks proving he doesn't grieve like a man who's innocent. Every day, he doesn't post a tribute. Every day, he doesn't attend a vigil. Every day his name is missing from the GoFundMe contributors list. The public makes another quiet judgment about him that no lawyer can ever undo. Public silence in a digital age is a statement. And his statement so far is, I don't care. This favors the Robinson family because every new piece of forensic evidence aligns with what Yolanda and Harry have been screaming since day one. Their daughter didn't do this to herself. Scenario 2. Alternative path. Now, if Tanzania moves first and charges Joe before the U.S. autopsy is even released, it's even worse for him. Tanzania doesn't have plea deals the way American defendants are used to. They don't have O.J. Cochran-style courtroom theater. They have a system that'll keep him in country on their timeline under their evidentiary rules. He's not ready for what's coming if Tanzanian prosecutors take this seriously. The Tanzanian Penal Code allows for pretrial detention measured in months, sometimes years, with extremely limited bail in homicide-adjacent cases. Joe would be sitting in a holding facility built for actual humans, not crypto founders. There are no concierge cells in Stone Town. We saw what international courts did to other foreigners in similar cases. Those guys spent years locked up before they ever saw a verdict. Joe doesn't stand a chance in a system where his Mark Andreessen Rolodex means absolutely nothing. His Silicon Valley friends can tweet support all day. They can't fly into Stone Town and bail him out. Even Human Rights Watch reports that Tanzanian pretrial detention often exceeds Western standards by months. Joe's lifestyle was built on speed, optionality, exits. The Tanzanian system is built on exactly the opposite. Every value he optimized his life around is a liability now. Either way, Autopsy first, charges first, the Robinson family wins, because every path forward forces the truth into daylight. Tanzania isn't releasing that surveillance footage to make Joe look good. They're sitting on it for a reason. When Tanzanian authorities sit on a piece of evidence, it's because the evidence is the show. They don't tease, they reveal. And whenever that reveal comes, it's gonna come in a press conference Joe's lawyers won't see in advance. Scenario 3. Industry/cultural impact. Looking at the bigger picture, this is gonna be the moment everyone remembers as when crypto's rockstar CEO era finally died. The asymmetric website already pulled its team page. Investors are gonna pull capital from anything Joe's name has touched. The Andreessen Horowitz crowd is gonna quietly distance, the way they always do when one of their boys becomes a liability. The redemption stories will start being written about other crypto founders. People will magically discover new, ethical voices in the space, and Joe's name will get scrubbed from conference websites, podcast guest histories, and thought leader lists overnight. That's how the industry self-cleans. Quietly, surgically, and without ever admitting they boosted him for a decade. 5 years from now, people will look back at this case as Joe McCann's biggest L, the one that didn't just bankrupt him financially but erased him from the only industry that ever took him seriously. Joe is watching the culture move on without him, and there's nothing he can do about it from a Tanzanian holding cell. Every business school case study about founder risk is going to mention his name. Every compliance officer is going to point to him as the reason for new background check protocols. Joe's biggest legacy is going to be the rule changes other people get because of him. And on the other side, Ashlee Jenae's legacy is about to become cemented. The soft life community isn't letting her name die. The GoFundMe blew past target. Cardi B has publicly questioned the case. Every Black woman influencer with a platform is pointing at this story and saying, trust your gut, read the room, leave when the room is wrong. Ashlee Robinson is going to be remembered as the woman whose death changed how an entire generation evaluates the men they're standing next to. Her platform is going to outlive her in a way Joe's never will. Brands that worked with her are already talking about a memorial scholarship. Her birthday, April 5th, is going to become a date Black women circle on calendars every year as a reminder. Her face is going to be on t-shirts at vigils, on murals in Philadelphia, in book dedications written by women who never met her but felt her. Whatever happens, one thing's clear. Joe McCann already lost. The autopsy is just paperwork at this point. The court case is just formality. The cultural verdict was rendered the second that 11-hour silence became public. He just hasn't accepted it yet. The court of public opinion already issued its ruling, and Joe's appeal window closed before he ever filed it. Ashlee deserves every eye on this case. Hit subscribe, drop a comment with her name, and stay locked in because the receipts are still dropping and you don't want to miss what comes next.